So without further ado, I'm going to handball first to Chris.
Thank you.
And take it from there.
Thank you very much, Hans, and thank you for the opportunity to have a chat today. Just quickly, Sportscover are an insurance provider doing sports, predominantly amateur sports, but a little bit of professional stuff all over the world. And some of the innovations that we have seen, we wanted to talk about today, really focused in on the risk management innovations and player welfare innovations. Mentioned in the previous session about concussion, and I thought I might pick up on that theme. It's one of the hot topics all around the world at the moment. I think most people in the room would be aware of what's happened with the NFL, the amount of money that's been involved, the concern that people have generally around player welfare and the ongoing player welfare that's coming out of the concussion issue. Some of the innovations may not seem to make sense in this area, but some of the things that I've picked up on there, some people may or may not be aware of amateur boxing. The amateur boxing world has actually removed head guards, partly to do with the whole issue around concussions and brain injury and blows to the head. For most people, that seems an unusual move. They did a lot of research, statistically have been able to analyse that with the head guards on, they lose peripheral vision, and they also give the athletes a sense of security that they don't necessarily have, and that the head guards then put them in terms of expanding the blow and making it a greater contact area, so on and so forth. So that was probably the first one, which then led into, in January, I'm sure the rugby guys would be aware of Saracens over in the UK using the X patch, where they've put some sensors on the heads of their players for both playing and training, and they're now trying to measure the statistical information around the impact to the head and where that could potentially lead. I guess that sort of followed on then. The RFU out of the UK have just released an online training course in the concussion area, which is very much aimed at the amateurs and how they are able to deal with concussion, making sure that people are getting the right sort of treatment. So that's been aimed very much at players, coaches and officials, and they've set up a couple of modules now online that they're asking people to go through. And then also some people may be aware of the HeadSmart program that's being run here in Australia. HeadSmart is really about getting the education and then using a range of tools to judge the concussion. So that seems to be a major innovation that's taking place across the world, and we're getting step change in the way that we're dealing with head injuries. I was actually reading in the Touchline just during the break there, the Saracens article, and it appears that Saracens have really bought into that concept. I think there's a statement in there that their CEO says that he doesn't want to meet their players in 20 years' time and they don't know who he is, which is a major issue. One of the other innovations that I've seen then along those lines is a pilot program that's happening in Melbourne in this upcoming winter sports season on the amateur side with a high-profile amateur organisation, where they have now appointed to clubs a risk management officer, and this risk management officer is going to be part of the committee. It will be an official position with a job title, and then they're going to be responsible for a lot of things that happen with regards to the running of the sport on a day-to-day basis, either training or playing, and then making sure that that has the flow-on effect to player welfare. Along those lines, some people in the room may be aware of the chaplaincy program that has started to kick off around Australia. So the chaplaincy program is basically a chaplain being assigned to an individual club, giving the members of the club access to the chaplain, no particular religion associated, but that they would then be able to use that with an understanding that the club is quite often the place where people draw their strength and where they feel that they can get the support and what they need. And that was a really interesting one on the player welfare side. We've seen it being used currently on everything from issues directly related to the club, as well as issues just related to the individual. So we could be talking about, the death of a member during a game, all the way through to maybe addictions and other things that individual members are dealing with. So I think those sort of innovations are changing the face of what we're seeing and the relationship, that we were talking about earlier with sports.
Okay. Thank you. I guess a good example of a theme that is high profile, player welfare, and different conceptions of what player welfare means, and then the different ways of how sport responds to improving or delivering on the responsibility for player welfare.
Absolutely,
so,
yes.
Now maybe the first question to the panel, we hosted an industry forum the other week, and one of the members, who was a director of a state sporting institute, when asked the question, what could universities, what could research institutes do for you? And her response was, what's going to be the next biggest thing in high performance sport? So if you ask 10 people randomly when they think about innovation in sport, 7 out of 10 will think about how to improve high performance sport. But the things that you've outlined are all outside that sphere. They're in the 30% of non-high performance. So if I would ask you the same question, what should we be aware of in sport governance land, sport management land, are the issues outside high performance sport? What would be your view? What are the issues we need to keep in the back of our mind?
I think aligned in every area is to accept and understand the data and information available, whether it comes from a performance issue or it comes from a behavioural or communication issue. Accept and understand.
So data in its complexity or in its mass, or?
That's probably the challenge, Hans, is finding a way to have it presented to the various levels of boards or subcommittees that it can be not only understood but actioned upon. I think we've already seen a lead from the previous panel about the importance of planning, and your planning is only going to be as good, and I'll probably defer to you, Chris, here, is your planning is only as good as your data that's available to you.
Yep. Absolutely. I totally agree with that, and I guess alongside that, sitting similar to the previous discussion about governance and structures, we've seen certainly our experiences wherever an Olympics turns up to a Western world country, that the amateur sport base becomes a lot more professional in the lead up, and then afterwards in terms of the way they organise themselves. Sydney was a fantastic example of that here. London continued that on. Athens I can't really comment on, although I have a Greek Cypriot wife, so maybe I should comment on it. But the continuation of that that structure around what should be involved at a club, what is the club's moral responsibility, what is the responsibility of administrators to supply to members, how far do you go, where's the line, do you open the door for people, do you walk them through the door and out the back, how far does it press? And I think that's what we're seeing now, also with a changing society, and I think all the three presentations here have talked about the individualisation of the sport experience. So I think from an administration point of view, that is also going to change what we do at a club level as well.
So maybe to take this approach one step further, if the next big thing in order to leap ahead of competition, innovation is all about leaping ahead of competition rather than me too behavior, you want to do something unique and new. And so in high performance sport, that's clear. You just want to, the America's Cup. When Australia won, it was all about thinking 20 years ahead. What would we do 20 years ahead in order to win this particular event? If we cast our eye 20 years ahead now and say, what would you gamble on from where you sit in your businesses? So outside that 70% of high performance and inside that 30% of organizational innovation, where can organizations leap ahead from your expertise and your insight into the business in 20 years?
Yep. I would say from my experience, similar to what these guys are talking about, the connection is definitely one of the issues, and certainly an opportunity for everybody to jump ahead. I think I read a little piece in the Sports Commission pamphlet that they put out there. They talked about netball as a case study, and similar to what Andrew was just talking about with my cricket, they created my netball, and that had a profound effect on the way that they were running and organising the sport. So I think that it's those sort of things, but my gut feel is also other social interactions like the drugs in sport issue, and for those who may have heard a bit about the debate on ice and what's going on just recently, some interesting things happening in Melbourne yesterday on the whole ice debate, and are we now getting to a point where we've got to make a decision around amateur sport? How far is competitiveness able to take us? Are we comfortable that, say, concussions are something that it's just part of the game and you get on with it? Or are we now looking ahead and saying, okay, if you guys think that taking some form of performance-enhancing drugs is appropriate at an amateur level, that's not really why you should be playing the sport. Have we gone results crazy on that level? Or do we need to stay that way? I don't know the answer to that question. Can I just say quickly
on a final note, Chris?
Yeah, look, I think one of the big issues for everybody in the room to potentially debate, in my opinion, will be government funding in 20 years' time as well, this country and New Zealand go through different economic cycles. And I think, Hans, you were involved with the Splish study that talked a lot about what are the models that are achieving success now at the top level, but how does that government funding flow down? In the UK, they've used the lottery funding to push out, and they've, in a lot of Western world countries, they're working into health budgets and those sorts of things in terms of achieving the funding. But if the Chinese continue their rise and the Indians get focused on sport as something that they want to achieve in, then what then becomes acceptable to us as a result, and as a result of that, does the funding continue to come through if you're still based on a model that's based around specific results?
Yep.
A question for debate.
Yeah. Great. I think that's a wonderful closing statement to this session. So please join me in thanking our panel members for this session.